Essential Self-Care Podcast, a podcast for those of us who are, let's face it, too busy for self-care. In this podcast, you will hear real life stories from people who leaned into their self-care as they were navigating life's storms. You'll learn practical tips, tools, and strategies to incorporate self-care into your own busy life as well. You'll hear from expert guests sharing their expertise on specific tools and modalities of self-care to optimize your well-being in your life, career, and relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Sheetal Ajmani. I am a physician, best-selling author, and founder of Radiant Living Institute, where I guide high-achieving women to get unstuck and learn to live radiantly again through major life transitions. Quick disclaimer before we dive into the episode, please know that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always seek the advice of your own health practitioner or mental health provider for your specific situation. Now, let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Essential Self-Care Podcast. I am so excited today to be in the podcast studio with my dear friend, Jelisha Gatling. Jelisha is a licensed marriage and family therapist based here in Hampton Roads, Virginia, so local here. So it's an honor always to have local guests on the show, which I've been doing more of recently because we can sit together here in the podcast studio and have this conversation. So really excited to have you here today to share a little bit more about your self-care journey. Welcome to the show, Jelisha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajmani. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to dive into our conversation. So I'm going to start off with a quick story.
Okay.
I didn't tell Jelisha which story I was going to share here, but I was thinking about this. So we met for coffee a few weeks ago and we were just chatting and just getting to know each other a little bit more. And it was so funny because we were just talking about, as naturally comes up in conversations when I meet anyone with coffee with just my interests and the line of work that I do, we were sharing a bit about our self-care journeys and really just getting to know each other. And we're going to dive into a little bit of that today. But it was so funny because what came up in the conversation, I don't remember who said it first. It was either you or me, but it was something to the extent of, hey, I was doing all of these things. I started to feel better. I stopped doing those things. I started to not feel good. And I don't know what I should do now. Actually, I think you had shared that. Sorry, calling you out of it. But I think you had shared that. But what's so funny is I started laughing so hard because literally a few months prior, I had said those same exact words to a family member of mine. I had said, I'm really feeling down. I'm really not feeling good. And, I was doing all these things like a year ago, felt better, did those things for a few months, felt better. Then I was like, oh, I don't need to do these things anymore. I feel great. A few months later, I was like in a downward spiral again. And so my dear loved one, my family member said, okay, so let me get this straight. You weren't feeling good. You did certain things. You started to feel better. You stopped doing those things. You're now not feeling good. So we both just started laughing because I shared this with Jelisha. I was like, literally, I said those same words just a few months ago. And we both just laughed at each other and ourselves, really it was laughing at ourselves because when you have someone reflect that back to you, like when we're trying to figure it out on our own, and we are both very intellectual, we intellectualize things. Like, you're a therapist, I'm a physician, we're used to intellectualizing things. But when you're sitting in, and I point this out also for our listeners, right? Jelisha's a therapist, I'm a pediatrician, we work in these healing spaces, right? Mm-hmm. Even then, right, we cannot figure this out on our own. Even then, something that, we're laughing about it now, it seems so obvious to us now. Right. But us trying to figure it out on our own, we could not do that. Neither I could do that nor you, right? No. But us reflecting that back, for me, having a family member reflect that back in our conversation, we were reflecting that back to each other. And I just thought that was kind of a fun and an insightful story to share in introducing you today.
Yes.
So go ahead. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey, about a time in your life where self care became no longer an option, but an
Mm,
absolute priority for you, and what
yeah.
that journey looked like for you?
Yeah. Well, so I moved to Virginia Beach from New York City about 2 years ago, and I was in a low funk. I had been for quite some time, and my hope was that upon coming here, a slower pace of life, being by the beach, that my depression would lift, and that didn't happen. In fact, it kind of got worse, and I was
Mm.
just feeling really hopeless, to be honest. I had this treatment resistant depression, and I mean, I've done tons of therapy and all sorts of healing modalities. And I got on antidepressants when I moved here, and that just kind of numbed me out. And I just was like, this can't be it. Like, there's got to be something else. And so I stumbled upon ketamine therapy. And I ended up researching it for about a year before I actually dove into it. And it it changed so much for me, and really allowed me to better take care of myself. It wasn't a miracle drug or something that you just take and like you feel better, but it did allow for me to sort of experience myself in a way that I had not experienced myself for a long time. I really felt like the joy that I could remember experiencing, I thought it was a thing of the past. And the therapy, the medicine, along with community was so huge. And I think that's one of the things that, even in our conversation, that,
Mhm.
in the story,
Yeah.
community is like everything.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that no matter what I'm doing, I have to have community and be yeah, connecting with other people. Like, it's just so important. And so that being a part of the ketamine therapy, I think made all the difference. But that was a huge turning point for me. And also I think it allowed me to actually try. Like, I feel like in a lot of ways I had given up because I felt really stuck. And so, I had a lot of I was really talking negatively to myself. And something that is really great about ketamine is it really detaches you from your ego. Like,
Mhm.
it separates you. And it gets you out of your head and allows you to sort of see your life as like an outside perspective. It's something that's really hard to kind of explain, but it really detaches you from all of the stories about yourself, the negative self-talk, the trauma. Like, you're able to see it but not be in it. And so that helped me to see new perspectives of things that had happened to me, of traumas that I thought I had resolved, but I was able to like forgive myself
Mm.
through that. So that's kind of a synopsis of yeah.
There's so much I want to reflect on. There's so many questions I want to ask you, but I think we'll get to all of that in the conversation. So I think the question that's coming up for me right now, just kind of naturally segueing into, is I'm curious. You described how the ketamine, kind of adding that into your sort of treatment and management,
Mhm.
and you had tried a number of things before that,
Mhm.
really helped you kind of create some distance
Yeah.
between your thoughts. And so I'm just curious, then, that coupled with therapy,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
How did that perhaps enhance or change your therapeutic experience, or your experience specifically within therapy? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? For one, it allowed me to realize that the therapist I was working with wasn't a good fit for me.
Mm.
I had been feeling like so stuck and kind of stuck, and I don't want to hurt her feelings, and just kind of putting my stuff to the back burner even in therapy. I just didn't feel like it was a fit, and she was like the third therapist I was working with in Virginia. So I was just feeling like, why can't I find that person that can like get me? So the ketamine did allow me to sever that relationship, and I found an amazing therapist who I was really able to like be really, really raw with, and face some things that I didn't even know I was suppressing. I mean, the ketamine just kind of pulls everything that you've been suppressing to the surface and allows you to face it again in a way that's not overwhelming or dysregulating to you. And you can think about it a little logically and have a different perspective. And so to be able to have those sessions and then unpack that with a therapist week by week was it was incredible. I mean, I think the therapy, it would have been a lot different probably without that facet of it. In addition to going to a couple of what I'll call them ketamine circles. They're these circles of no more than 7 people who are going through the treatment as well. And we're just unpacking what our treatments are, what they're unpacking for us, what we are learning, what we're struggling with, and a lot about integration, which is what are you doing in between the sessions? It's just like therapy, right? You know, you don't just kind of go and then go back to your life, but there are things that you are doing to implement. And so that was helping me to really set up habits, like good habits, because I had no routine. I had really no structure outside of seeing my clients and going to work. Like I had no kind of structure. And so it allowed me to slowly, step by step, start to build in some of those healthy routines, like moving my body, you know, making that a priority, because that was something that had long gone, you know, been gone. And we all know that that is everything when you have depression or when you're struggling with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I want to, again, there's just so much. I feel like we could talk about so much about this, but you know, one thing that I found very interesting out of many things that you shared, but one thing was that you found that your initial therapist just wasn't a good fit. Yet what I was hearing was you were almost, you know, hesitant to say something. Almost what I was hearing was like, uh, almost worried about like hurting your therapist's
Yeah,
feelings, right?
absolutely.
And I wanted to point that out because I feel like that is not uncommon
Mm-mm,
at
mm-mm.
all. You know, we seek out therapists or coaches to help ourselves, to better understand ourselves, to work through difficult things. Yet I see particularly so many women who we tend to have who, you know, not all women, but many of us women who tend to have people pleasing tendencies,
Yep.
right? Then enter this therapeutic space but are still holding back, right?
Yes.
And still holding back for fear of how is our therapist going to judge us, even though this is supposed to be a
Yes.
safe space? I don't want to
Mhm.
hurt my therapist's feelings, but I don't think this is a good fit. How do I say that? Who do I talk to about that?
Yeah.
Right? Um,
I don't want to overload them. That's something I
yes,
was like, oh, she
yes,
can't handle all
yes.
of my stuff. Not today. I'm going to see
Yes,
this.
yes. I've had friends, you know, share about how they feel that it's indulgent, you know, to kind of
Mhm.
spend that time focusing on themselves. I myself, I can share, you know, during that same time period that I was telling you about, that we were laughing at ourselves
Yeah.
about earlier in that conversation. During that time frame, I remember I was speaking with that same family member, and I was like, you know, I'm feeling these things, but I don't know how to talk to my therapist about it.
Mhm. Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know? And I needed that guidance and reflection from a family member to be like, "You just say it." But, you know, I think especially for us women who do tend to intellectualize things,
Mhm.
right? Do tend to, you know, rationalize our way through things, right?
Mhm.
It can be we can bring that into therapy as well. And so we can
Absolutely.
almost keep ourselves shielded from that full therapeutic process. It sounds like the ketamine helped you break free from some of that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it helped me break free from a lot of shoulds that I had about myself. It feels like a fresh coat, a fresh uh, like there's a fresh snow. So like all these different grooves of how I thought about myself or things that I'm lazy. Why is this so hard for me? I have a good life. Like, why am I feeling this way? It doesn't make sense. Just beating myself up for feeling bad for feeling bad, right?
Mhm.
And so like the ketamine, it it puts a fresh coat of snow over those grooves, and you can then start to set new grooves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it makes it a lot easier to go to that yoga class or to go for that walk. Whereas before it felt like it's just too much.
Yeah.
And then you start to build that habit and it gets easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Quick shout out to today's sponsor, Reclaim Your Radiance, Radiant Living Institute's signature coaching program designed to help you reclaim your worth, renew your energy, and restore your happiness in your life, career, and relationships. This 6-module curriculum has already helped countless women rediscover themselves through life's storms. From setting difficult boundaries within toxic relationships to finding their inner strength and power while navigating divorce and co-parenting, to aligning their career and business with their authentic self, and to learning how to live for themselves again after their kids have left the nest. This program has been a guiding force for women to live unapologetically and shine brightly within their lives once again, or often, even for the first time ever. Experience the results for yourself. Head over to radiantlivinginstitute.com/reclaim-your-radiance to learn more and get started.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, definitely can resonate with that, like feeling bad about feeling bad.
Yes.
Like adding more shoulds to the shoulds that you already have. Like you already have this should, and then you're like, and I should be feeling this way about this should. I should not be feeling this way about it, right? Feeling bad about feeling bad. Again, I think that's part, I don't know, this is me theorizing right now, but I think that's part of maybe folks sort of like us with this sort of personality type of intellectualizing and rationalizing our way through things, right? And so now all of a sudden we're like judging ourselves for that. So again, self-compassion. That's why I always go back to self-compassion, right? Like, how can we bring more self-compassion into our lives? And I was so excited to have you on and to have this conversation. And I really appreciate your honesty and openness and vulnerability here today, because I'll be honest with you, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is not something that I know a lot about. It's not something that I'm an expert in. It's not something that I have personal experience with. And it's really important to me on this show to bring and to explore ideas and modalities that that maybe I'm not the expert in, like I've explored a lot of self-care modalities, and there's a lot that I can speak to from definitely a high level of expertise, and this is one that I'm not. And I think it's important though to, and so I just want to openly and candidly share that as well with my listeners. I have been reading quite a bit about it, since I knew we were going to be having this conversation today. But I think it's important because one thing that I always say as well is that self-care does not look the same for everyone, right? We all have individual unique self-care journeys, and there's different tools and modalities. And so it's so important to me on this show to bring on and talk about these modalities that, maybe that's not my expertise, right? But so that for our listeners and for myself, just exposing ourselves to different tools and modalities, because we never know when we're going to need a specific tool or modality within our toolbox. So I really appreciate that. And I have been reading, like I said, I have been reading a bit more about ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And again, I think it's important to speak of it in that way, right? I mean, that's exactly what you're doing. Ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. It's not just the medication. It's just not just the therapy. It's you're bringing it all together, right? Because as I was looking into it, like there are a lot of sort of ketamine clinics that are just prescribing the ketamine, but not as much supervision or regulation or really following a therapeutic process. So I would say for anyone who is listening, who is interested in this or wants to look more into it, you researched it for a full year before you actually started, and you found, a place where you felt safe and comfortable, with how they were doing it and bringing it all together. And so I do think that that is very important. Ketamine has long been used in medicine as a sedative and for anesthesia.
Right.
Now the dosing is different, obviously completely different, right? When you're using it as a sedative or for anesthesia than when you're using it for in this setting and for ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And so just kind of bringing this just a little bit from what I've been reading. It's often kind of categor it's often kind of placed in a similar category as psychedelic assisted
Yes, it
psychotherapy,
is.
although it's not
Mhm.
it's not technically
Not
a psychedelic.
technically,
Like, it
but
doesn't technically work in exactly the same way. So from
right.
what I was reading, it was, you know, the with psychedelic assisted therapy, that's looking at things like ayahuasca, psilocybin, right?
Mhm.
And those work on serotonin receptors. And sorry, I was really getting intrigued by the science of this. So that works into the, serotonin receptors, and then ketamine works more on the NMDA glutamate receptors. So they work differently.
Differently, yeah.
But both, from what I was reading, both create this response or situation that you had described of uh, getting you out of your ego, like
Yeah.
getting your ego out of the way.
Yeah.
And this is a reason that I'm really fascinated by this, because I see this as such a crossover between neuroscience, spirituality, and mental health. And so this is why I'm finding this topic very fascinating. And it's just been, this year, you're not the first person I've met this year and had a conversation with who has tried or has had a positive experience with something like this. And so I've just been really curious about this, and just kind of this how it blends this like neuroscience, spirituality, and mental health. And when I think of this sort of, it's getting the ego out of the way,
Mhm.
getting you out of those repetitive patterns of thinking, it sounds
Yes,
like,
like,
which is what
yeah,
you shared.
loosening the grip
Loosening the
of
grip
those,
on
yeah.
this. Yeah. And it's interesting because that is what happens through meditation as well, right? But with meditation, I would say making sure that you are, and I often will say this, making sure that you are seeking the assistance of a guide, especially if you're working with really, perhaps traumatic experiences that may come up,
Absolutely.
really deep rooted patterns. Specifically, also, if you do have a clinically diagnosed
Mhm.
mental health condition, right? Because those patterns, those grooves, like you said, may
Yeah,
just be
they're
so much more
deep.
deeply rooted. And so I think, working with someone for meditation, such as myself, like that is something that I work with clients with and I'm able to assist with. But meditation will do that. It can be a bit of a longer path
Mhm.
to get there in terms of the
Mhm.
duration,
Mhm.
right? It sounds like this worked, or you felt the effect of it a little bit more quickly.
I did, but I will say meditation is very much a part of this
Yeah.
experience. Like, I meditate before I take the medicine and after. Like, it's helped my meditation practice so much.
Mm.
It's become a lot easier and something that I'm not as resistant to, if I'm
Mm.
being honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And become really appreciative of, like, that I can just like be, and I'm worthy. I'm loved. Like, that's
Mm.
enough. I think that's been the biggest takeaway. So it's been
Mhm.
absolutely spiritual. But yeah, I'd say perhaps it would be longer
Mhm.
alone, but I
Yeah.
want to say that at least for me, has been so integral to the
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love because what I love about you sharing that as well is that it really is a multifaceted approach.
Hmm.
Really a multifaceted approach, which I think for any self-care journey, it needs to be a multifaceted approach. It's not just one thing. And that is, I will share with you one of my big pet peeves.
Oh.
So one of my big pet peeves with like kind of just social media, pop media culture and portrayal of self-care is seeing these sort of self-care quote unquote gurus who will share, this is all you need.
Oh.
All you need is this one breathing technique or this one
Ooh.
meditation technique. And it is just one of my biggest pet peeves because that is not true.
Yes. Yes.
And that is why I always go back to on this show that the same self-care activity may not be right for everyone. And it also depends on
Hmm.
the season of your life too.
Absolutely.
Something that worked for you years ago might not work for you now, and you might need to change it up. So yeah, I think that's all. Oh goodness, we touched on so many
I know.
great points. I feel like we could keep chatting about
Absolutely.
this. But for time's sake, I think we'll kind of start to wrap things up here, I
Mhm.
would like to give you the opportunity, if there's anything else, any other sort of final points that you would like to make about your the self-care journey that you described and your experience with that for our listeners.
Um, if I could just circle back to the shoulds that we were
Mm,
talking about, I feel like that's been one of the biggest things for me is like catching those shoulds, being more aware of them, but also like replacing them with could. That's
mm,
something that I've been actively practicing, and it just changes the whole vibe
yeah.
and energy of anything. I should go to the gym. I should, eat XYZ. I could go for a walk. I could,
Mm,
take a nap, or it's just I should has shame in it. Like no matter
yeah.
what you are talking about. And so I realized I had a lot of shame, and I had so many shoulds that I wasn't even conscious that I had.
Yeah.
And so, I think, yeah, if that's something that you are cognizant of and you have these shoulds, try replacing them with could. It changes the energy. And yeah, I just find that really meaningful.
I love that. Thank you for bringing that up,
Mhm.
because that is something that we had talked about before recording, and I wanted to come back to it,
Mhm.
and I was about to forget. So I'm so glad that you did, because I agree. I think it's something I've been practicing for years now, to try to eliminate the word should from my vocabulary, and I do notice, of course, it still pops up
Yeah.
here and there. It's such a deeply
Yeah.
that's a deep groove, as you mentioned. And so, but I am improving in that area. But I never really thought about, and I know how it feels when I say should,
Mhm.
but I don't think until you mentioned it that I really realized that that feeling is shame,
Mhm.
right? That when I say should, yeah, what does that do? That puts all of this, like, shame that I'm not doing these things that I should be doing,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Wherever that expectation, I mean, it's an expectation, right? That
Yes.
should is an expectation, whether that's coming from myself. Most often it's self-imposed, I feel like,
Mhm.
but also perhaps ingrained a bit by society's expectations, external expectations as well, or what I think those expectations are. And so I think that's, I don't know, I found that very insightful, and I think just really helpful to kind of talk about that as well, that is sort of an underlying thing behind that word. And I really like that you offered our listeners and me an option for, because I think that can be helpful, right? So when that should comes up, well, okay, I noticed it. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
And I love that you offered an option of, well, replace that with the word could,
Could.
and
Yeah.
just try that and see what that feels like. So I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. You are doing really amazing work. As I mentioned in the intro, Jelisha is a licensed marriage and family counselor here in Hampton Roads. She works with couples for couples therapy as well as premarital counseling. So,
Mhm.
where can people learn more about you and the wonderful work that you're doing?
Yeah, they can find more about me at letsunpacktherapy.com. That's my website. And on TikTok and on Instagram, Saving the Saver.
Wonderful. I will include all of those links in the show notes. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Essential Self Care Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a positive review, and share this episode with someone you know. And remember, your free guide, 6 simple yet powerful steps to create your radiant life, is waiting for you at radiantlivinginstitute.com. Download it today.